Okay, I know it is the early hours of the morning. Yesterday was Thanksgiving. I'm sure you all are with your families and such. I am finally back home, but I want to talk about something while it's on my mind because people are dissecting the police report very thoroughly, as you should be. We're talking about from the amount of time that she was supposedly receiving treatment from this mystery doctor, to why she wasn't transported immediately to the hospital, to the fact that it was Winter Donovan who was the one who eventually called an ambulance once Quella started having seizures. But the one thing that most other Black women want to ignore is the fact that the police report says that Daejhanae Jackson is transgendered. Everyone wants to gloss over that, besides a handful of people. And then the majority of the people who are talking about it are suggesting that, well, maybe they listed Daejhanae as transgendered because, so many people view Black women as masculine. Let's be honest. Y'all view Black women as masculine. Y'all view dark-skinned Black women as masculine. So you're assuming that the same law enforcement personnel who are conducting this investigation can't tell the difference between a dark-skinned Black woman and a trans person. But I'm going to tell you something, it makes sense. It makes sense. That, to me, that explains why Quella wasn't trying to fight, because she knew she would be fighting a nigga. That explains why that girl didn't fight back. The other thing it explains is some of the conversations that are being had. Because, see, people are talking. Y'all just don't know where to go to listen. But the people that actually know ShanQuella and the Cabo Six are saying that this all started, now this is all allegedly, but they're saying that this all started because the guy who is supposed to be Quella's best friend was involved in a sexual relationship, I think, with the dude Malik. Because people were wondering, like, why was Quella's boyfriend comfortable with her going on this trip with a handful of other girls and then these guys? It's because, and I think the boyfriend actually came out and said, it's because, he knew that, like, the dudes that were going on the trip were not into girls. Okay? So he didn't view them as a threat. Apparently, there was some evidence that Quella had in her phone about that sexual relationship between her so-called best friend and Malik. They didn't want that shit getting passed around. And so people were saying that that was the reason for the fight. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, why would... I'm thinking, like, okay, if Daejhanae is a biological woman, why would she be that angry about Quella having that information in her phone? Now that we know that the police report says that Daejhanae is transgendered, it's like, oh, got you. So in Daejhanae's mind, it's like, okay, Daejhanae wanted to protect her fellow members of the rainbow community. So they sick Daejhanae on Quella, right? And use that person to attack this girl. And everyone's looking like, well, why wouldn't Quella fight back? Well, because she won't trying to fight no nigga. Because she knew that's a man. And it also makes me wonder about the other two people that participated in the attack, are they also trans? We don't know. But one thing we do know, right, just being Black people and listening to some of the conversations that take place, we do know that these male to female Black trans people often make comments saying that they have no problems fighting biologically Black women, right? Since y'all let them call themselves women, they have no problems fighting you. Well, look at what happens when they do. There is no way that the average woman can pick up a woman that is 125 pounds and slam her down with such force that it broke her neck. Do you know how hard it is to break like bones? Especially, and I think they said she had skull fractures. You know how hard your skull is? You know how hard you have to be able to throw somebody down to inflict those type of injuries? And I don't understand why so many people are glossing over that. Because you don't think that the police report is wrong when it talks about the doctor's, frankly, incompetence. You don't think the police report is wrong when it talks about how long that poor girl laid there dying. I've only seen one person say, well, even if she was transported to the hospital and she died, the hospital still would have automatically reported it to the police and the investigation could have started sooner. I've only seen one person say that. But outside of that, y'all are dissecting everything else on that police report. But you want to ignore the fact that that police report says that Daejhanae is transgender. Now, that might be based on Daejhanae's own statements or statements of other members of the Cabo Six. Or maybe they were like, okay, well, you know, based on the voice and then body type, certain other things, maybe they were able to tell. Because let me tell you something. When you see a person in person, you usually can tell whether or not they are a biological woman. Even if you see, y'all are looking at wigs and makeup and contouring and cosmetic surgeries, right? But even if you just look at the body structure, now you have some women who have kind of like a boxy shape, right? So their hips, they don't have hips, we'll say, but you can still look at them and tell that they're a woman. But then if you look at men, their shoulders are broader than their hips. That's a good point. That's a good point. It could be on some form of ID. That's true, because when you travel out of the country, you have to have a passport and all of that stuff. And some people who are males, but they live as women, some people don't go through the process of having their actual ID and documentation changed, because if I'm not mistaken, you have to be under some sort of a doctor's evaluation before you do all of that. Hey Nyla, happy Thanksgiving to you. But they didn't just make that up. You know what I'm saying? They didn't just look at a dark-skinned Black woman and list her as trans. Like, come on, y'all. That doesn't make sense. Do you know how many Black people and specifically Black women travel down to Cabos? They're accustomed to seeing Black women. They know the difference between a person who is a Black woman versus a person who is a male to female trans person. There's a reason that Daejhanae is listed as trans on that police report. And we can't overlook that. We can't say that it doesn't matter. It does matter. We're constantly reminding other Black women that, hey, Whether or not you dealing with something that's got on a wig and a dress, that they still have their male strength. They're always going to be stronger than you because they came into this world in male bodies, even if they're on hormones, because that's another argument that I see a lot of these trans people make. They say that it's okay for them to fight women because they're on hormones, and it's like that that doesn't make any sense. The hormones that they have them on do not change their overall biological makeup. It just does things like, causes them to grow body hair in a way to where the hair is finer. In some cases, it lessens the muscle mass for them in the chest area so that it becomes easier for them to get like implants and stuff. But they're still stronger than women. They still are. This is why you have the ongoing conversation about whether or not it is fair to women to have to compete in sports against people who are male to female transgender, because they're inherently going to be stronger and faster because, again, they came into the world in male bodies. So when you snatch that wig off of Daejhanae and you pull off the eyelashes, what you're watching in that video is a man beating a woman to death. Now, we understand the basic meaning of the term femicide, right? But just in common use, for most people, the term femicide is not used when you have a woman committing an act of violence against another woman. There's a reason that the police report says Daejhanae is transgendered, and there's a reason that is connected to the fact that Mexico is calling this a femicide. Because there have been other situations where people have gone down to Cabos and got into fights, or where women have been attacked by other women. But there's a reason that the police report notes that Daejhanae is transgendered. And that is there to point out that Daejhanae would possess more strength than a biological woman. That's true. They have to be on those hormones for life. And I don't know what's involved in the cost and all of that stuff, but I don't know if that's always covered under insurance plans or whatever. But you're right. If they're not consistently on those hormones, I'd imagine that they would still, they'd still walk around with their male hormones. Yep. True. They had to pat Daejhanae down. I don't think it would be an accident, because let me look at something real quick. I don't think it would be an accident because it does look like they did some form of an investigation, even though they did try to sweep it under the rug. I will grant you that. But no, it's like you all are pointing out, they would have had to probably pat everyone down. They probably, at the very least, would have to verify everyone's identity. So people would have to show their IDs, Like there's a reason that that's coming up. And I don't understand why everyone is so willing to go with everything else that's on that police report, but then says, oh no, well, Daejhanae is actually a dark-skinned Black woman, and that's why they're saying that this is a trans person. It's like, come on. Stop projecting your feelings about Black women onto these police investigators. The everyday average person does not walk around and see a dark-skinned Black woman and assume that they're looking at a trans person. Okay? Yeah, but like I said, even if they didn't do a pat down, like anytime you interact with law enforcement, you have to show them your ID. And, well, I can't, I don't want to try to get mine now, but when you travel, all of that information is on there. It's got your birthday, your name, and most of those documents have your gender. So if you're walking around in a wig and a dress, but then you've got a document that says you're male, that would explain why law enforcement would say, okay, this is a trans person. And that very much matters, because if that had been a fight, or well, it wasn't a fight. I mean, they brutally attacked that girl. But if it had been a situation where a woman attacked her, Quella would not have had those type of injuries. And that adds to the brutality of the assault, because they wanted to make sure that the trans person was the one that attacked her. But it makes sense. It explains why Quella didn't want to fight. Well, plus her parents have adamantly stated that she just wasn't, like the type of girl to fight and stuff like that. They say she was a really, really sweet girl. And that's why it's just so fucked up to me that she chose to hang around such a rotten group of people. But just think about it. And like I said, in other sectors, people are getting information from people that actually knew Quella in the Cabo 6. And they're saying this fight all started because that girl had proof that her so-called best friend, I think it's that dude Khalil, and Malik were involved in a sexual relationship. Malik didn't want that getting out, which would explain why he's in the background like, come on, Quella, fight back. Because they were trying to make her delete whatever she had in her phone. So they literally beat that girl to death. And that explains why nobody stepped in to stop it. That explains why you have, I think Khalil got there a little bit later, but that's why Khalil didn't do anything to stop it. That's why Malik didn't do anything to stop it. And I think there may have been a third guy there, and he didn't do anything to stop it, because they were trying to help them niggas protect their secret, to the point of watching that girl be beaten to death. And y'all got to be really careful assuming that them people are your friends. Because at the end of the day, I feel like this. It's not my job to keep another grown person's secret. Okay? Now, if you're two consenting adults doing what you do, generally speaking, I don't care. But at the same time, it's not my fault that you're in the closet. And we live in a different day and time, at least in the United States. I'm not talking about other parts of the world. But in the United States, people are not being killed for being part of the rainbow community. People are not, put it to you like this, people have legal protections. So if they deal with harassment from a job or anything else because they're part of that community, they have ways of getting financially compensated. They have ways of making sure that their employers or anyone else who discriminates them get punished. And in some cases, they can actually be criminally prosecuted. So these are not the days in our country where people have to live in the closet and outing someone could affect their life. So it wasn't that girl's job to keep their secret. And especially to the point of fighting her over it. It's like y'all are grown enough to do it. At some point, somebody's going to find out anyway. But that explains why they all sat there and watched. And everybody needs to keep an eye on the third dude that was there too, because it's like, okay, now we're talking about Khalil and Malik, but maybe you sat and watched, nigga, because you on that same shit. You on that same type of time. So y'all beat that girl to death. You watched the trans person and the other two, who I now have to question them, but you watched them attack that girl, and as grown-ass men didn't do anything to stop it because you were punishing her because you felt like she was going to out you. And maybe all the members of the trans community who are attacking Black women and who are attacking Quella and protecting Daejhanae, maybe they all know that was the reason for that violent assault on that girl. And maybe they're using the weight of their platforms. Maybe they're using the weight of their platforms to try to shame Black women into keeping their secrets. But I want to make myself very clear. I don't have an issue with how other people live. I don't have problems with nobody as long as you're not fucking with me. But let me make myself very clear. It's not my job to keep your secret. It's not my fault. If you're a gay man or a trans person, it's not my fault that these DL niggas are fucking you and they don't want it to be known. If you loved yourself, you wouldn't deal with someone who wanted to fuck you in secret in a society where y'all can openly mate, date, get married, have kids, and do the same things that everybody else can do. It's not Black women's fault that these niggas don't want to acknowledge y'all. It's not our jobs to keep your secrets. Because frankly, keeping your secrets is killing Black women. Go over to the CDC and Kaiser Permanente and these other organizations that collect statistics on HIV and other STDs. And let the researchers show you that there is a direct connection between the rates of HIV and certain other STDs in Black women and the fact that a lot of DL games are being played amongst Black society. So keeping y'all secret kills Black women. So if Quella knows, hey, Khalil and Malik, you know, they fuck dudes. If she knows that, and she doesn't tell the next Black woman that they pursue, her silence could indirectly cause another Black woman to put herself in a situation where she might end up contracting that monster. Because we know that's running rampant in the Black rainbow community. Particularly, not so much with the L, but with the male G's, B's, and T's. But it's people got to stop acting like it's our responsibility to keep their secrets. It's like, listen, if you fucking other niggas and you don't want to get caught, then that's on you to protect your secret. But it's gotten to the point where they are so brazen and so brutish that they all felt justified in literally beating that girl to death. And again, notice they sick the trans one on her because they knew that Daejhanae had the strength of a man. That's very telling. You're right. I think she didn't want to fight back for multiple reasons. Like, her family, specifically her parents, her mom and dad have been advocating for their baby, but they have been going around telling everybody she just wasn't the type of girl to fight. You know what I mean? Like, she just wasn't that type of girl. And then, like you said, Nyla, I mean, she didn't want to fight her friends. And then for me, like, if I didn't have a weapon and a male to female trans person tried to fight me, I would try to defend myself. But something in my head would be like, well, this is a person that has the strength of a man. That's probably another reason she didn't want to fight, because she knew that ultimately she was fighting a nigga. She would be fighting a nigga had she chosen to participate in the fight. Yep, you're true. You're right. I mean, they, DL black men feel an insecurity about their attractions to other men. And they project their own feelings about that behavior onto black women. And what they want to be able to do is they want to be able to present an image to the world where they are in relationships and marriages with black women while they do what they do in secret. Every black woman that I know doesn't care about what other consenting adults do. But just like the people in the rainbow community have the right to their sexual preferences, black women have the right to our sexual preferences. So, as a heterosexual black woman, I have the right to say, you know what? I don't want to be romantically involved or sexually involved or intimately involved in any way with a man who is not heterosexual. But black men feel so entitled to have access to black women that even when they're gay or bisexual, they feel like they are owed sexual access to black women. And now, we're being required to face the fact that they feel like they have the right to beat us into submission. When it comes to keeping their secret, they literally believe that they have the right to beat us into submitting to their desire that we keep their secret, to the point where this young woman, who at most I think was 125 pounds, was brutally attacked and beaten to death by a trans person. Do you understand that if the roles were reversed, the outcry would be deafening? If you had a black woman or a group of black women who brutally attacked and beat a trans person to death, do you understand that every rights organization in the country would be yelling and screaming to make sure that there was justice for that trans person? But yet we see a situation where a group of closeted black men and a trans black person literally felt like they had the right to beat that girl into submitting to keeping their secret. That's dangerous. Hold on, let me do something real quick. Because I don't associate. Listen. Oh, that's right. I need to. I don't. And see, this is the other thing about the entitlement. I don't understand why men feel so comfortable coming into my chat when I'm. Why? Listen, motherfucker, I'm not talking to you. Now, right now, you're in timeout. But if you pop up in my chat again, I'm blocking you. Okay? But yes, for Black women, we need to understand that these people are not our friends. And at this point, we're looking at a situation where some closeted Black males felt like they had the right to beat a Black woman to death because they felt like she wasn't going to keep their secret. And it's like, listen, everybody has done everything possible to make sure that you have all the legal protections in the world. Why are y'all still in the closet anyway? It's because of your insecurity about your behaviors and your sexual desires. It's not Black women's job to keep your secret. It's not. I don't believe, just to keep it 100, I don't believe in outing people. When you're talking about consenting adults, I don't think it's right to scream from the rooftops, oh, Laquan and Tyrone do whatever. But what I will say is this. If I know that a dude is DL and I see a woman that I know being pursued by that dude, I'm going to pull her to the side and be like, hey, he fucked with other niggas. I'm going to let her know. Now, if she still deals with him, cool, but she can't say she didn't know. But outside of that, I'm not the type of person to just blast someone's information to like a wide audience of people. Not when it comes to that type of stuff. All right, y'all. But I'm going to get off of here. But I want y'all to pay attention and just look around and ask yourself, why is everyone glossing over the fact that the police report says Daejhanae is transgendered? And why are people suggesting, for the people who are talking about it, why are they suggesting that the police report says that they're trans only because, in their words, well, they're just doing that because Daejhanae is a dark-skinned Black woman? No. Get out of here with that bullshit. Because again, anytime you interact with law enforcement, even during a routine traffic stop, right? Don't you have to show them your ID? Daejhanae is, we're going to say, I have to say allegedly or possibly, Daejhanae is possibly a trans person who just hasn't had their IDs updated yet. So when law enforcement interacts with trans people, what they do is when they see a female presenting trans person, and then they get the ID and the ID says male, then they'll note that the person is transgendered. And then, like Nancy pointed out, it's possible that they patted everyone down. And if so, they're like, oh, there's a little something extra here that doesn't exist on a biological woman. So they would have known that. But my immediate guess is that they checked everybody's ID and they saw that M on Daejhanae's paperwork. Even if you say other, like, what biological woman who lives in the world as a woman is going to use other? What biological man who lives in the world as a man is going to use other unless they're non-binary, right? Or gender non-conforming? But that's not what the police report says. The police report doesn't say that Daejhanae is non-binary. The police report doesn't say that Daejhanae is gender non-conforming. And we also have to understand that those terms may or may not be used in every other country. And also, what happens with a lot of trans people and how they get outed on their IDs is because their ID will list their birth gender. A lot of people aren't using the term other, but that is a good point. But still, the police report says trans. Okay, so it gets connected to your fuller record. But I'm telling you, they saw an ID or when they did their witness interviews, that's where it came out. Because again, the Mexican authorities at those resorts, they deal with Black people all the time. You know, a lot of Black people travel to places like Mexico and then also like parts of the Caribbean. So they're not so unaccustomed to seeing a dark-skinned Black woman that they're going to automatically say, oh, that's a man. And even so, say they saw Daejhanae and they said, oh, that's a man. They would have said male on the police report. They didn't say male. They said transgendered. Okay? Yep. And that's why I'm saying it makes sense to me now why that girl didn't fight back, because she knew that she wasn't going to be fighting an actual woman. Let me look this up real quick. Let's look this up real quick. So anyone who got their passport on or after April 11th would be able to use like X as their gender marker. So you can select male, female, or use X for unspecified or another gender identity. But that's assuming that Daejhanae got their passport after that change was made this year in 2022. Right, as of 2022. But who's to say when Daejhanae got their passport? And again, the police report doesn't say that the gender is unspecified. The police report specifically says transgendered. Yeah, you can do that as of this spring. That's for people who get a passport after April 11th of this year. But again, see, this is what I'm talking about. People aren't doing that kind of wordplay when it comes to everything else on the police report. But when it comes to the gender, people want to gloss over the fact that the police report specifically says transgendered. It doesn't say unspecified. It doesn't say gender non-conforming. It doesn't say non-binary. It doesn't say unknown. It specifically says transgendered. Yep, some do. Because for some people, their gender is not tied to their sexual identity. Gender and sexual identity are two separate things. So you do have people who are transgendered So you do have male to female trans people that do date and in some cases marry biological women. Okay, yeah, and change his birth certificate. Yeah, some people don't go through the process of changing their ID because in certain states you can't just request to have your ID changed. You have to actually, to be identified as trans in some states, you have to actually go through a psychiatric evaluation. Yep. Yep. Because if a male to female trans person believes that they are female or a woman and they are in a relationship with a biological woman, then they will view themselves as lesbians. And from what I understand, there are some lesbians that actually prefer relationships with male to female trans people. It is confusing. It is confusing. I just think that I don't believe that they just said, oh, this is a dark-skinned Black woman, so we're just going to say transgender. That for the people who I've heard participate in those conversations, that just suggests that they assume that everyone else shares their view that dark-skinned Black women are masculine. I think that law enforcement would have used that designation based on either statements that Daejhanae themselves made or based on some sort of, however Daejhanae's gender is listed on their whatever documents they would have had to present to law enforcement. But good conversation. But yeah, people do confuse gender identity and sexuality. But yes, so like for example, how Zaya Wade is male to female trans, but they are dating someone who is a female to male trans. Or yeah, Zaya is dating another trans person, basically. But yes, you all have to be careful, and especially be careful about these male to female trans people who suggest that they don't have problems fighting women, because we now see that they possess the brute strength to be able to beat a woman to death, because ultimately, their biology is what it is. Now, their gender identity might be different than their biology, but their ability to fight is not based on their gender identity. It's based on their biology. So we'll see what comes out. But I'm telling you, I just have a hard time believing that they automatically would have listed Daejhanae as transgendered, if they didn't have a reason for it. And I don't understand why that's being glossed over. And frankly, people like T.S. Madison and others will owe Black women a huge apology. And I feel like T.S. Madison owes Black women a huge apology because the police report says that Daejhanae is transgendered. Okay? Of course, it's an apology that we won't get. It's an apology that the majority of Black women won't require. But that's something to be considered. We often support people who ultimately do not like us at all. And, pay attention to the fact that pretty much everyone in the Black male to female trans community supported T.S. Madison. They've been dragging Black women. And we now know that the police report, law enforcement, had reason to believe that Daejhanae is transgender. And like I said, I think it's because of an ID that was presented, or like Nancy said, they may have patted everyone down. You don't know, but there's a reason for that, and we don't need to gloss over that. I'm not saying that means, that we have to be violent against anyone. But what I am saying is, again, you got to be careful about them when they start talking about their willingness to fight biological women. And this is an unfortunate and glaring example of what can happen when they do. All right? Y'all enjoy the rest of your Friday. Goodbye.